Maria Ivanovna could not have known that the pink roller skates in her hands would change the life of an entire family. The flea market vendor turned the children's shoes over, assessing the wear on the wheels. Someone had scratched the name Lenotchka uncertainly on the white leather surface. Before we begin the story, please write which city you are from. We are very interested in where you are watching our video. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave your rating. March 1989 was unusually warm. The snow had melted early, exposing the dirty sidewalks of the provincial town of Oktyabrsk. Mikhail Kuznetsov, as he had done every weekend for the past 3 years, was walking around the flea markets of neighboring towns. In his jacket pocket was a worn photograph of a 7-year-old girl with light curls. "How much are you asking for this?" The man's voice trembled. The saleswoman looked at the buyer in bewilderment. Usually, children's roller skates sold quickly. Soviet parents had to seize any opportunity to buy imported goods. But this man looked at the merchandise as if he had seen a ghost. Mikhail held out the money with trembling fingers. His heart was beating so hard that it seemed the neighbors at the market must be able to hear it. For 3 years, he had searched for any trace of his daughter. He had checked every child's item, every toy, every object that could have belonged to Elena. But these roller skates couldn't belong to anyone else. August 15th, 1986, began like any other summer day. Natalia Kuznetsova was preparing breakfast in the kitchen of their communal apartment when Elena ran into the room, dragging her new roller skates behind her. The gift for the first day of school, imported roller skates from Czechoslovakia, cost Mikhail half of his monthly salary as a mechanic. "Mom, can I go skate in the yard?" The 7-year-old girl jumped up and down with impatience. Natalia glanced out the window. The courtyard of the 5-story building on Zavodskaya Street was bustling with the usual activity. Old men played dominoes under the poplar trees, women hung laundry, and children played in the sandbox. It was a safe, familiar place where everyone knew each other. "Don't leave the yard," her mother warned. Natalia would repeat these words to herself every night for the next 3 years. Elena ran out into the street at 4:20 p.m. Her neighbor, Aunt Klava, remembered the exact time. It was just then that she looked out the window and heard the sound of roller wheels on the asphalt. The girl was skating carefully along the path between the apartment buildings, diligently avoiding puddles and stones. At 4:30 p.m., she was seen at the sandbox. 5-year-old Vovka Morozov was playing with toy cars when Lena rolled up to him on her roller skates. The boy remembered that moment well. He really wanted to ride. But the girl said that the skates were new, and she couldn't let him use them. After that, no one saw Elena Kuznetsova again. At 7 p.m., Natalia became worried. Usually, her daughter came home for dinner without being reminded. Mikhail went down to the yard. The roller skates were gone, and so was Lena. The neighbors immediately joined the search. In Soviet courtyards, there were no strangers' children. "Maybe she went to a friend's house?" suggested Aunt Klava. But all her friends were at home. Elena didn't visit anyone. By 9 p.m., all the residents of the 5-story building had gathered in the courtyard. The men searched the basements, attics, and an abandoned construction site behind the building. The women called relatives and checked hospitals. Children under the age of 10 stayed at home under strict supervision. Mikhail crossed the threshold of the district police station for the first time in his life. Lieutenant Semenov, who was on duty, took the statement without enthusiasm. Statistics suggested that in 9 out of 10 cases, children were found with relatives or acquaintances. A day was the usual time for such a disappearance. "Come back tomorrow if she doesn't show up," he advised. But Elena did not show up the next day or a week later. The case was handed over to senior investigator Anatoly Petrovich Voronov. 52 years old, 30 years in the police force, gray temples, and a reputation as a man who never gives up. If anyone could find the missing girl, it was him. Voronov worked systematically. The first circle was the family and immediate circle. Mikhail and Natalia were thoroughly checked. References from work, income statements, statements from neighbors. The family conflict theory was quickly ruled out. The Kuznetsovs were a model couple. The second circle was random crime. The investigators studied a map of the area and analyzed possible routes. The videos showed that the girl was able to move quickly, which meant that the search radius had to be expanded. But the most disturbing theory emerged on the third day. Local police officer Petrenko brought information about a strange man. A week ago, residents of a neighboring house had seen a stranger watching children playing. The description was vague. Middle-aged, dark clothes, kept to himself. "A pedophile?" Voronov asked bluntly. "It's possible," replied the police officer. The maniac theory changed everything. If the criminal had taken the child away, the search would have to be conducted within a radius of hundreds of kilometers. Time was working against the investigation. With each passing day, the chances of finding the girl alive were diminishing. Voronov organized a massive search. All available personnel were called in. Local police officers, detectives, even cadets from the police academy. They combed through the forest park, searched abandoned buildings, and checked every basement and cellar within a 15-kilometer radius. Mikhail asked to be included in the search teams. Voronov agreed. The father knew his daughter better than anyone else and could notice things that strangers would miss. They searched for 2 weeks. They found many things. Old animal bones that they mistook for human remains, children's clothes left behind by homeless people, even a corpse. But it was an adult man who had drowned a year ago. Elena was nowhere to be found. "She's been taken away," Voronov concluded after another meeting. If the girl had been taken out of the city, the case took on regional significance. Descriptions were sent to all district police departments in the Kuybyshev region. Elena's description was broadcast on police radio stations. Responses came immediately. In the first week, more than 50 reports came in about girls who resembled the missing girl. Voronov personally checked each one. He traveled to neighboring cities, questioned witnesses, and established the identities of the children. All the checks turned out to be false. The most painful one occurred in September. A woman from Syzran swore that she had seen Elena at the bus station. The girl was crying, and an unfamiliar woman was standing next to her, roughly pulling her away. Mikhail and Natalia rushed to Syzran on the first train. The witness led them to the house where she had allegedly seen the suspicious woman. But the woman turned out to be a local resident, and the girl was her daughter, who just looked very similar to Elena. "We get calls like this every day," said a sympathetic local investigator. "Parents see their children everywhere." It was a cruel truth. Grief made people overly susceptible to any coincidences. October brought a new lead. While checking previously convicted criminals, investigators discovered Gennady Shestakov, a man serving time for indecent assault. Shortly before Elena's disappearance, he had been released and settled in a neighboring district. Shestakov categorically denied any involvement in the kidnapping. His alibi was weak. He claimed that on August 15th, he had been drinking alone at home all day. His neighbors could not confirm this. Voronov used every interrogation technique in his arsenal. Psychological pressure, confrontations with neighbors, repeated interrogations at short intervals. But Shestakov remained confident and did not admit his guilt. Moreover, his psychological profile did not match that of a kidnapper. He had previously committed crimes against children he knew, acting impulsively and without planning the abductions. Stealing a child from a yard and disappearing without a trace was beyond his capabilities. It wasn't him, Voronov concluded after a month of investigations. The investigators were running out of leads. By November, the investigator had exhausted all standard avenues of inquiry. Family conflicts were ruled out, a random crime was not confirmed, and known serial killers were found to be uninvolved. The most frightening possibility remained: professional kidnapping. Voronov knew of the existence of criminal groups specializing in child trafficking. Such crimes were rare, but extremely difficult to investigate. The professionals left no traces, operated according to well-established patterns, and had connections in different cities. If Elena had been kidnapped by such people, the chances of finding her were slim to none. The winter of 1986-1987 was the hardest in the Kuznetsov family's life. Mikhail took unpaid leave and continued the search on his own. He traveled to neighboring regions, showing his daughter's photo at bus stations, in shops, and at markets. Natalia posted missing person notices in all medical institutions in the region. As a nurse, she knew that if the girl was alive, sooner or later she would need medical attention. The calls continued to come in, but less and less frequently. Public interest in the disappearance was waning. People quickly get used to other people's grief. In the spring of 1987, a painful incident occurred. A neighbor, Aunt Klava, cautiously hinted to Natalia that some of the residents of the house were beginning to suspect the parents. They were acting too calm, searching too methodically. Normal parents would have gone crazy, she repeated. The suspicions about the family were absurd, but painful. The Kuznetsovs found themselves in psychological isolation. Their grief made them strangers to those around them. In the summer of 1987, a tragedy occurred that temporarily overshadowed the case of Elena. An 8-year-old girl was raped and murdered in a neighboring district. The perpetrator was caught quickly. He was a local alcoholic who had committed the crime while intoxicated. Voronov personally questioned the murderer about his involvement in Elena's disappearance. But he was physically incapable of committing the kidnapping. On August 15, 1986, he was in the hospital with a broken leg. By the end of 1987, the active phase of the investigation was over. The case of Elena Kuznetsova was classified as an unsolved crime, or a dead end, as they were called in police circles. Voronov continued to receive isolated reports and check new leads, but without the same intensity. The main forces shifted their attention to current cases. In March 1988, the investigator submitted his retirement report. 30 years of service, dozens of cases solved. But the case of Elena Kuznetsova remained his main failure. "I couldn't find your daughter," he told Mikhail when handing over the case. Lieutenant Sergei Kozlov was appointed the new investigator. 28 years old, law school graduate, modern investigative methods. The young officer studied the case files and came to the disappointing conclusion that all the standard leads had been exhausted. But Kozlov was not ready to give up. He started from scratch, using methods that Voronov did not know. Psychological profiles of criminals, analysis of the geography of the abductions, study of similar cases in other regions. The results did not come immediately. It was only at the end of 1988 that the lieutenant found an interesting pattern. 4 more children had disappeared in neighboring regions in recent years. All of them were preschool and elementary school age. All disappeared without a trace, and all searches were unsuccessful. Kozlov contacted colleagues from other regions. A joint analysis showed that the abductions could be linked. There were too many similarities in the methods and circumstances. "We are dealing with an organized group," the young investigator concluded. This version opened up new possibilities, but required coordination between several regions. Kozlov began the painstaking work of establishing links between the crimes. It was at this time that Mikhail Kuznetsov once again went to the flea market. March 1989. The district market in Chapaevsk. Rows of traders selling everything from old clothes to car parts. Mikhail went from stall to stall, looking at children's items and showing a photo of his daughter. "Have you seen a girl like this? Have you bought children's roller skates from anyone?" Most of the traders waved him away. Who remembers where this or that item came from? But Mikhail stubbornly continued his inquiries. And at the stall of Maria Ivanovna Petrova, he saw them. Pink roller skates with the name Lenochka scratched into them. His daughter always signed her things, just like that, with those uneven letters she had just learned to write in first grade. "Where did you get these?" Mikhail's voice broke. Maria Ivanovna was frightened. The man looked as if he had seen a dead person. A neighbor brought them to sell. She said her daughter had grown out of them. "What neighbor? Where does she live?" "Nina, from the house across the street. Morozova is her last name." Mikhail wrote down the address with trembling hands. He bought the roller skates without haggling and immediately drove to the local police station. Lieutenant Kozlov listened carefully to the father's story. He examined the roller skates and compared them with the description in the file. The similarities were obvious. The size, color, and characteristic scuffs in the same places. "We'll check out this Morozova," the investigator promised. But they decided to proceed with caution. If the family was really involved in the kidnapping, any sudden movements could scare the criminals away. Kozlov organized a covert surveillance of the house at 15 Mira Street. The results of the surveillance shocked even experienced operatives. The Morozov family really did live there. Gennady, 43, a truck driver; Nina, 39, a shop assistant; and a girl of about 10, known to the neighbors as Oksana Morozova. But when the operatives compared the girl's photos with childhood pictures of Elena Kuznetsova, there was no doubt. It was her, Elena, alive, grown up, and completely unaware that she had been searched for 3 years. Kozlov understood that he was on the verge of a sensation. A case that had been considered hopeless now had a chance of being solved. But the most difficult part lay ahead: proving the crime and identifying all those involved. Who were these people? How had they managed to hide the kidnapped child for 3 years? And most importantly, who else was involved in this scheme? The answers to these questions would turn our understanding of how far human cruelty can go for personal gain on its head. Part 2. Why did he do it? The task force gathered in Kozlov's office on April 12, 1989. On the table were photographs of a 10-year-old girl taken with a hidden camera. Light curls, gray eyes, familiar features. There was no doubt. Elena Kuznetsova was alive. She was in the 4th grade at a local school, went by the surname Morozova, and had no idea that her real parents existed. "What do we do?" asked Captain Druzinin, an experienced operative. Kozlov laid out the plan of operation, simultaneous arrests of all suspects, seizure of documents, medical examination of the child. The main thing was not to traumatize the girl and not to let the criminals escape. The Morozovs may not be the only participants, warned the lieutenant. At 6 a.m. on April 13th, the arrest team surrounded the house at 15 Mira Street. Gennady Morozov opened the door in his underwear, clearly not expecting guests. His reaction gave him away instantly. His face turned pale and his hands began to shake. "Get dressed. We're going to the department," Druzinin said curtly. Nina Morozova tried to resist. She screamed that it was a misunderstanding and demanded to see a warrant. But when she saw photos of Elena taken 3 years earlier, she fell silent. The most painful part was explaining the situation to the child. The girl did not understand why strangers were taking her mom and dad away. She cried, clinging to Nina and calling her mom. "We'll be back soon, sweetheart," Morozova managed to say, before she was taken away. Elena was temporarily placed with a local police officer and his family, who had children of their own. They explained that her parents were ill and in the hospital. The girl believed them. At 10 years old, children are still trusting. Gennady Morozov's first interrogation began at 10 a.m. The man sat opposite Kozlov, nervously fidgeting with his fingers and avoiding eye contact. Classic behavior for someone who knows they are guilty. "Tell us about your daughter," the investigator began. "Oksana was born in 1982. Nina had a difficult delivery, and the documents were processed later." His voice trembled. Kozlov placed Elena Kuznetsova's birth certificate on the table. The dates did not match by 4 years. "Let's try again. Where did you get your daughter?" Morozov fell silent. He understood that the game was over. Nina was questioned at the same time. The woman appeared more confident than her husband, but she was just as nervous. She repeated the same story. Oksana was their biological daughter. All the documents were in order, and they had committed no crimes. Then explained the origin of these videos. Kozlov showed her a pair of children's shoes with the inscription, "Lenochka." Morozova was taken aback. She did not expect that the shoes would reveal the whole scheme. "We bought them at the market. My daughter asked me to change the inscription," she lied. It took several hours to examine the inscription. Forensic experts determined that Lenochka had been scratched out by a child's hand, approximately 7 years old. Morozova could not have known this. By evening, it was clear that the couple was ready to negotiate. Gennady gave in first. The man understood that if he was exposed as a liar, the punishment would be harsher. "All right, the girl is not ours," he confessed during the evening interrogation. Kozlov turned on the tape recorder. The most important part began, obtaining a confession. "Tell us how it all happened," the investigator asked. Morozov sighed heavily. The story he told exceeded the investigator's wildest expectations. "Nina and I couldn't have children for 5 years. The doctors said we were infertile. Nina was very upset and wanted a child at any cost." A standard family drama familiar to many couples. But then something terrible began. In 1986, I met a man. He offered special services for money, a lot of money. "What kind of services?" Kozlov asked. "To get a child, healthy, beautiful, so that no one would look for them or bother them." The lieutenant felt a chill run down his spine. Child trafficking is a crime that is punished particularly severely. "Who is this man?" Morozov gave him a name. Viktor Semenovich Krasnov, 48 years old, previously convicted of fraud. He worked as a long-distance driver and had connections in the criminal world. Krasnov said he could arrange an adoption, unofficial but reliable. The child was from a dysfunctional family. The parents were alcoholics and would be happy to get rid of him. The lie sounded plausible. Many citizens of the USSR knew about the existence of gray adoption schemes. The official procedures were too complicated. How much did you pay? 10,000 rubles, all our savings. Plus, we borrowed some. The sum was enormous. It was a skilled worker's annual salary. But for a childless couple, it wasn't too high a price to pay for the joy of motherhood. When did you get the child? August 20th, 1986. Krasnov brought the girl late in the evening. He said that the parents had already signed the waiver and that the documents would be finalized later. 5 days after Elena's disappearance. The coincidence was more than telling. Kozlov checked the dates. The logic of events formed a gruesome picture. On August 15th, the girl disappeared from her home, and on August 20th, she appeared in a strange family. 5 days is enough time to take a child away, prepare documents, and carry out adaptation. How did the girl behave? She cried for the first few days. She asked for her mom and dad. Krasnov said it was normal, that she would get used to it quickly. And did she get used to it? Morozov nodded. The child's psyche is surprisingly malleable. Within a few months, 7-year-old Elena had indeed become attached to her new family and forgotten her former life. When did you get the documents? 6 months later. Birth certificate, certificate from the maternity hospital, medical records, everything as required. The fake documents were high quality. Only professionals with access to government forms could have produced them. Kozlov understood that he was not dealing with random criminals, but with members of an organized group. Krasnov was just one link in a chain that could stretch across several regions. The interrogation of Nina Morozova confirmed her husband's testimony. The woman told the same story, but with important additions. Krasnov warned us that if anyone showed interest in the girl, we should let him know immediately. He knew how to solve such problems. What kind of problems? He didn't explain. He just said he had connections and no one would dig too deep. Connections in law enforcement, quite possible. Many high-profile cases in those years were stalled precisely because of corruption in police circles. Did you suspect that the girl had been stolen? Nina paused. This question touched on the main issue, the degree of guilt of the adoptive parents. We guessed, she admitted quietly. But we really wanted a child. We thought that since the parents had given her up, she would be better off with us. Self-justification, typical in such cases. Criminals convince themselves that they are acting in the interests of the victim. By the end of the second day, the investigation had a complete picture. Gennady and Nina Morozov did not kidnap Elena themselves, but knowingly bought a stolen child. They knew about the criminal origin of their merchandise, but turned a blind eye for the sake of their own happiness. Now they had to find Krasnov. The search for the organizer of the scheme took a week. The man was not in hiding. He worked at the same bus depot and lived at the same address. Apparently, he considered himself untouchable. The arrest took place on April 22nd in the garage of the bus depot. Krasnov was repairing a truck when the operatives arrived. He tried to escape, but they surrounded him. "Viktor Semenovich, come with us," said Druzinin. Krasnov was an experienced criminal. He understood the rules of the game and knew his rights. He came to the first interrogation with a lawyer and was prepared for a long fight. "I didn't kidnap anyone," he said immediately. "If the Morozovs lied, that's their problem." A classic line of defense. Deny everything. shift the blame onto accomplices, demand proof. But Kozlov had proof. A search of Krasnov's apartment yielded sensational results. In a hiding place, they found documents for several children, fake certificates from maternity hospitals, and blank birth certificates. "Are you a collector?" The investigator sneered. Krasnov did not answer. He understood that silence was his only chance for a lenient sentence. It took 2 weeks to examine the documents. The results shocked even seasoned criminologists. The fake certificates were made on real government forms, using official seals, in full compliance with current regulations. "He has connections at the registry office," the expert concluded. Kozlov began checking the employees of the district registry offices. The task was difficult. Corrupt officials know how to cover their tracks. A lead appeared by chance. While analyzing Elena's documents, they discovered an interesting detail. The fake certificate was signed by Galina Stepanovna Filatova, the head of the registry office in the neighboring district. Filatova had worked in the system for 20 years and had an impeccable reputation. But a detailed check revealed some curious facts. The woman had recently bought a dacha, started dressing expensively, and her children were attending a prestigious school. "Where did the money come from?" Kozlov asked during the interrogation. "My husband earns good money," Filatova replied. But her husband was a simple accountant, and his salary did not cover the family's expenses. The contradiction was obvious. Under pressure from the facts, Filatova gave in. She revealed a scheme that shocked even experienced investigators with its cynicism. Krasnov came every 6 months. He brought ready-made documents and asked me to stamp them. He paid 500 rubles for each form. "Didn't you ask where the children came from?" He said they were private adoptions. Rich, childless families buy children from poor parents. Everyone is happy. No one suffers. Another lie that people wanted to believe. Filatova was getting good money and didn't want to know the truth. "How many documents did you process?" The woman gave a number that sent a chill down Kozlov's spine. 12 certificates in 3 years. 12 children. 12 families who are still searching for their missing babies. The scale of the crime exceeded even the wildest guesses. Krasnov and his accomplices had created a veritable child trafficking factory. They kidnapped children in one city, sold them to childless couples in another, and forged documents with the help of corrupt officials. The scheme worked flawlessly. Children disappeared without a trace. Their parents searched for them for years in morgues and hospitals, and the criminals made huge profits. "Where are the rest of the children?" Kozlov demanded an answer. Krasnov remained silent. He understood that every word would increase his sentence. They had to search on their own. Using fake documents, they identified the families who had bought the children. The geography was striking. Saratov, Penza, Ulyanovsk, even Moscow. Each check brought new shocks. Some children were found alive and well, while in other cases the families managed to escape after receiving a warning from Krasnov. But the most terrible discovery was yet to come. During the interrogation of one of the buyers, it became clear that not all of the kidnapped children survived to be sold. Some were killed immediately if they were sick or too restless. Krasnov said that the goods had to be of high quality, the woman said. Merchandise. For these people, children were simply merchandise. By May 1989, the investigation had uncovered the entire criminal group. Krasnov was the organizer and perpetrator of the abductions. Filatova was the document forger. Several families were buyers of the stolen children. But the main question remained unanswered. Who exactly kidnapped Elena Kuznetsova on August 15, 1986? Who lured the 7-year-old girl and handed her over to the criminals? Krasnov remained silent. He did not name his accomplices or reveal the methods used in the kidnappings. The investigation reached a dead end. Then something happened that changed everything. On May 28th, an unknown man called Kozlov's office. He introduced himself as Alexander Petrovich and said he had information about the Kuznetsova case. "Let's meet in the park near the regional library. Tonight, at 8, the voice suggested. Kozlov hesitated. Anonymous meetings were against the rules. But the case needed any lead it could get. At 8 o'clock in the evening, a man in his 50s appeared in the park. He was nervous, looking around, clearly afraid of being followed. "Are you Investigator Kozlov?" "Yes." "What do you know about the case?" The man looked around again and spoke quietly. "I worked with Krasnov, not of my own free will. He blackmailed me, but I never touched the children, I swear." Another participant in the scheme. Kozlov prepared to record the testimony. "My name is Alexander Petrovich Sidorov. I work as a doctor in a children's hospital. Krasnov forced me to forge medical certificates for the stolen children." "What was he blackmailing you for?" "I had problems with drugs, painkillers. Krasnov found out and threatened to report me to the police. A classic recruitment method. Find some dirt, get an obedient accomplice. What do you know about the kidnapping of Elena Kuznetsova?" Sidorov paused. What he was about to say could cost him his life. Krasnov didn't kidnap the girl. He had an assistant, a young guy, a drug addict. Krasnov supplied him with drugs, and he did the dirty work. Name? Oleg. I don't know his last name. About 25 years old, thin, always wears a sports jacket, lives somewhere on the outskirts. A new name, a new participant. But Sidorov knew more. Oleg told me how it happened. He lured the girl by saying that his mother had asked him to bring her home. Elena believed him. At 7 years old, children are trusting. A simple but effective scheme. The child suspects no deception and goes with the stranger willingly. Where did they take her? To Krasnov's dacha. They kept her there for several days until they found buyers. Several days. While her parents were going crazy with grief, their daughter was just a few kilometers from home. Is Oleg still alive? Sidorov shook his head. Overdose. Last fall. Krasnov said it was his own fault. He didn't know how to calculate the dose. A convenient death. Dead people don't testify. Why did you decide to tell us? I have a daughter myself. I can't keep quiet anymore. These children, they're someone's kids. Better late than never. Sidorov's information helped piece together the full picture of the crime. The scheme turned out to be even more cynical than initially suspected. Krasnov's method was simple and effective. He found childless families willing to pay any amount of money for a child. He received orders for babies of a certain age and gender. He sent Oleg out to find a suitable victim. Oleg looked for children in parks, courtyards, and playgrounds. He chose children from well-off families. They looked healthy and well-groomed. He lured them in any way he could, promising candy, saying that their parents had asked him to bring them home. The stolen children were kept at a dacha until buyers were found. If a child cried a lot or was sick, they were killed. Defective goods were of no use to anyone. Healthy children were sold for 10,000 rubles each. That was a huge amount of money at the time. Filatova made fake documents for 500 rubles. The net profit was 9,500 rubles per child. With 12 victims, that's over 100,000 rubles in total income. A bloody business built on parental grief and children's lives. The case was sent to court in June 1989. The public demanded the maximum punishment for all participants. The parents of the kidnapped children wrote letters to the prosecutor's office demanding justice. But there was another task ahead: to reunite Elena with her real family. The girl had lived with the Morozovs for 3 years and considered them her family. Psychologists warned that a sudden change in environment could traumatize the child. The meeting was organized cautiously. At first, Mikhail and Natalia simply got to know their daughter, introducing themselves as friends of the family. Elena was wary of them. After years in a strange family, she had learned not to trust strangers. Then they gradually told her the truth: that she was born into another family, that they had been looking for her for a long time, that her real parents had never stopped loving her. Elena didn't believe them at first. At 10 years old, it's hard to accept that your whole life has been a lie. But her memory gradually returned. The girl remembered the courtyard on Zavodskaya Street, her neighbor Vovka, even the day she went roller skating. "Where are my roller skates?" she asked. Mikhail took out a pair of pink skates with a name scratched on them. Elena recognized them instantly. "Lenotchka. I wrote that myself," she whispered. It was the moment when the past and the present came together, when the stolen childhood was returned to the girl. But the most important revelation was yet to come, the one that would make her rethink the whole story and show how far the criminals had gone in their cruelty. At the trial, Krasnov finally decided to speak, and what he said exceeded even the worst expectations. Part 3. Justice. The courtroom of the Oktyabrski District Court was packed. On June 15, 1989, the trial that shook the entire region began. The parents of the 12 kidnapped children sat in the front rows, clutching photographs of their little ones. Krasnov appeared in court a changed man. Months in pretrial detention had aged him 10 years. His face was gray, his hands were shaking, and his eyes were dull. He understood that his life was over. Judge Petr Ivanovich Semenov read out the indictment. 12 counts of child abduction, human trafficking, forming a criminal gang, and forging documents. Each count carried a 10-year prison sentence. "Defendant Krasnov, do you plead guilty?" asked the judge. Viktor Semenovich stood up. He was silent for a long time, as if gathering his thoughts. The lawyer nervously fiddled with his papers, hoping for a denial of guilt. "I admit it," Krasnov said quietly. The courtroom fell silent. No one had expected such a turn of events. "I admit it all. Every single thing. I want to tell the whole truth." Prosecutor Anna Vasilyevna Komarova hid her surprise. The confession simplified the process, but she suspected a catch. Experienced criminals don't give up without a reason. "Tell the court about your crimes," the judge suggested. Krasnov began to speak, and what he said exceeded the darkest expectations of those present. It all started in 1985. I was working as a truck driver and traveled a lot around the country. On one trip, I met a man who offered me a way to make money. "What kind of man?" "His name was Boris. I don't know his last name. He said he worked in adoptions. There are rich families who are willing to pay a lot of money for healthy children. A standard start to a criminal career. The lure of easy money. An introduction to the criminal world." Boris explained the scheme. "We find childless couples who are willing to pay. Then we look for children whom no one will look for. orphans, street children, children of alcoholics. But Elena Kuznetsova was not an orphan, the prosecutor remarked. Krasnov nodded. He had reached the most frightening part. For the first 2 years, we really did work with street children. We took kids off the streets, got them papers, and sold them to families. No one suffered. The kids were better off in foster homes. Self-justification that helped him sleep at night. But in 1986, demand skyrocketed. Rich families wanted healthy, beautiful children from good families. They were willing to pay 3 times as much. And you switched to kidnapping? Boris said, either we make big money, or he finds other people to do it. I had debts, I needed money, I agreed. It was a moment of choice between good and evil. Krasnov chose evil. Elena was the first victim of the new scheme. Oleg spotted her in the yard, watched her routine, and chose the moment to kidnap her. How exactly did the kidnapping happen? Krasnov fell silent. This part was the hardest for him. Oleg approached the girl while she was rollerblading. He said that her mother had asked him to bring her home because something important had happened. Elena believed him and went with him. Sobs could be heard in the courtroom. Natalia Kuznetsova covered her mouth with her hand, trying not to cry out. Mikhail clenched his fists until his knuckles turned white. Where did you take the child? To my Dasha, in the village of Dubovka. They had set up a room there for temporary detention of children. You mean prison? The prosecutor clarified. Yes, Krasnov agreed. A prison. The judge demanded details. What the courtroom heard was a living nightmare. Krasnov's dacha had been turned into a real concentration camp for children. A room with barred windows, a lock on the outside, and minimal food and water. The children were kept there for several days to a month until buyers were found. The children cried and begged to be let go home. We told them that their parents had abandoned them and that they would now have a new family. Psychological abuse on top of physical imprisonment. How did Elena behave? The first few days she cried constantly. She called for her mom and dad. Then she became quieter. She realized that screaming didn't help. A 7-year-old child, broken by the cruelty of adults. How many days did they keep her? 5 days. They found buyers quickly. The Morozovs had been waiting in line for a long time. They wanted a preschool-aged girl. How was the child handed over? The Morozovs were brought to the dacha at night. They told Elena that these were her new parents, that they would take care of her. The girl did not resist. After 5 days in captivity, she was ready to go with anyone. The cynicism shocked even seasoned lawyers. The prosecutor asked the main question, "Why did you do it? Was it really just for the money?" Krasnov was silent for a long time. Then he replied in such a way that a deathly silence fell over the courtroom. At first, yes, it was only for the money. But then it became a game. I felt like a god who decided his people's fates. I could destroy one family and make another happy. The power over life and death was intoxicating. Pure evil, unadorned. A man who enjoyed the suffering of others. Did you realize what you were doing? Yes. But I didn't care. Other people's pain didn't affect me. The courtroom erupted. Someone shouted, "Monster!" Other parents began to rise from their seats. The judge struggled to restore order, but Krasnov saved the worst for last. Not all the children survived to be sold, he admitted in a hoarse voice. What do you mean? If a child was sick or too restless, we got rid of them. You killed them? Yes. Hysteria broke out in the courtroom. Women cried, men shouted curses. The judge called a recess. People couldn't bear to hear the details of the children's murders. When the hearing resumed, Krasnov revealed a horrific figure. Of the 12 children who had been kidnapped, only 7 were still alive. 5 were killed as defective goods. Among the dead were a 3-year-old boy with a stutter, a 5-year-old girl with asthma, and 2 children who cried too much. Their bodies were buried in a forest near the dacha. "Where exactly?" demanded the prosecutor. Krasnov gave the coordinates. The next day, the investigation team found the children's remains at the specified location. An examination confirmed that all the children had died violent deaths. The trial lasted 2 weeks. The adoptive parents, experts, and investigators testified. Each day brought new horrific details. The Morozovs received suspended sentences. The court took into account that they had not participated in the abductions and had taken good care of Elena. Gennady received 5 years probation, Nina 3 years. Filatova received 7 years imprisonment for forging documents and aiding and abetting human trafficking. Krasnov listened to the verdict standing up. 25 years in prison in a strict regime colony, the maximum sentence at that time. "Do you have any last words?" asked the judge. Krasnov raised his head. For the first time during the entire trial, he looked at the victims' parents. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he said. "I know I don't deserve it. I just want everyone to know that I got what I deserved." The courtroom was silent. Even the remorseful criminal was met with nothing but disgust. But the Kuznetsov family's story had a happy ending. Elena gradually adapted to life with her biological parents. The child's psyche proved to be surprisingly malleable. The girl quickly remembered her former life and became attached to Mikhail and Natalia. It was more difficult with the Morozovs. Elena sincerely loved her adoptive parents and considered them her family. The breakup was painful. Psychologists suggested a compromise solution. Elena would live with her biological parents, but see the Morozovs regularly. Gradually, the frequency of visits decreased, but the connection remained. "I now have 2 families," said the 10-year-old girl. The wisdom of a child sometimes surpasses adult logic. By the fall of 1989, the Kuznetsov family's life had returned to normal. Elena started 5th grade at a regular school, made friends with her classmates, and joined a dance club. The pink roller skates took pride of place in the children's room. They were a symbol of a lost and found childhood. Mikhail returned to work at the factory, but now he hurried home every evening. The time spent without his daughter taught him to appreciate every minute of family happiness. Natalia took 6 months off work to help her daughter adjust. Her nursing skills came in handy. The girl needed not only love, but also professional psychological support. A year after the family was reunited, journalists asked Mikhail, "How do you feel about Krasnov?" "Nothing," he replied. "No hatred, no anger, just nothing. That man doesn't exist for me." Complete indifference proved to be worse than any revenge. Krasnov served his sentence in a strict regime colony in Mordovia. Prisoners do not like criminals who harm children. 3 years later, he was found dead in his cell. The official cause of death was a heart attack. The unofficial cause was that prison justice had been served. The other participants in the scheme got what they deserved. Filatova was released after 5 years, but she was banned from working in government agencies for life. She spent her last years trading at the market and living in poverty. After their suspended sentences, the Morozovs moved to another city. Gennady changed professions and became a security guard. Nina got a job as a cleaner. Society does not forgive child traffickers. But the main thing is that the other kidnapped children were found and rescued. Of the 7 survivors, 6 were reunited with their biological families. One child remained in a foster family of his own free will. He was too young when he was taken by the criminals and did not remember his biological family. The Krasnov case set a precedent in Soviet legal practice. For the first time, human trafficking received the maximum punishment. Legislation was tightened, and adoption procedures were made more transparent. A small monument was erected in Oktyabrsk in memory of the children who died. 5 names on black granite, 5 lives cut short by human cruelty. The parents of the deceased children regularly bring flowers there. The pain of loss never goes away, but memory helps them to live on. Elena Kuznetsova grew up, graduated from school with a gold medal, and entered a teacher training college. She chose to become a primary school teacher because she wanted to protect children and help them grow up in safety. In 1995, she married a classmate. The wedding was modest, but both families, biological and adoptive, were present at the celebration. Mikhail and Natalia danced with Gennady and Nina Morozov. Forgiveness proved stronger than resentment. Elena has 2 children, a son and a daughter. Their grandchildren are being raised by 4 grandparents. The children are growing up in an atmosphere of love and security. I want my children to never know fear, says Elena. The pink reels are kept in the family archive. Sometimes Elena shows them to her children and tells them the story of her childhood. Not all the details. It's too early for the little ones to know about human cruelty. But the main thing they understand is that good always triumphs over evil. Family is the most important thing in life, and parental love can overcome any obstacle. Lieutenant Kozlov had a brilliant career. The Krasnov case brought him fame and promotion. He is now a colonel and heads the Department for Combating Human Trafficking. That case changed my life, he admits. I realized that I wasn't working with papers, but with people's lives. Every year, on August 15th, the anniversary of Elena's disappearance, the Kuznetsov family gathers around the holiday table, not to mourn, but to celebrate. This day has become their daughter's 2nd birthday. We lost her as a little girl and found her as a grown-up child, says Natalia. In a sense, we have 2 daughters, the one who disappeared and the one who returned. The wisdom of a mother's heart needs no explanation. The story of the Kuznetsov family has become a symbol of hope for thousands of parents of missing children. It has proven that you must never give up. Keep searching until the end, and believe that your loved one will return. Sometimes miracles happen, sometimes justice prevails, sometimes love proves stronger than evil. And the pink rollers with the name Lenochka, scratched out, remind us that the most ordinary things can change a life forever, for the better. Today, Elena Vladimirovna Kuznetsova-Sokolova works as the director of an orphanage in Samara. She has dedicated her life to protecting children who have been left without parents. In her office hangs a photograph of a 7-year-old girl on roller skates in a sunny courtyard in August 1986. Every child deserves a happy childhood, she tells visitors, and she does everything she can to ensure that these words do not remain empty. Justice prevailed. The family was reunited. Love won. The story had a happy ending. What do you think? Was the punishment for the child traffickers harsh enough? Share your opinion in the comments.